Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 7, Episode 1, Image in the Sand. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct, and as I say every single week, except for the last 2 weeks, of course, you should find us and follow us because we are great. We're a good time. We're going over a great show, and we have finally entered into the final season of this spectacular run. So I'm both sad and excited because we're finally here and we're going to see how this all plays out, of course, but then there'll be no more Deep Space Nine. So what are we going to do when we get there? We'll see. So yes, as David said, tonight we are starting season 7, Image in the Sand, and just right off the bat, just want to say this is an episode that I didn't recall very well, only because I realized I don't watch season 7 that often because it is the beginning of the end. So I don't like that it's the end. So yeah, there are some things about the episode that I didn't remember. So of course I had to go through and do my own rewatch rather than relying on memory. But that's how it's going to be pretty much from here on out. These are episodes that I have not seen in quite some time because they're season 7. So um, yeah. Now, before we get into the episode, of course, tonight, we always like to do a little bit of a check in with each other. And since it has been some time since we've done the show, David, how's your 2 weeks been?
Been good, been good. Had the men's retreat at church, which was one of the first weeks that we were gone. And then last week, once again, played that like day long board game that I've played a couple times now with friends. This was the first time I came close to winning. Came close, but the friend of mine who has played the game way more than I have, he had basically snuck like a power for himself before I realized what he had done, which basically forced me to not be able to do anything. Like he basically had the power to stop me from taking actions, which sucked. Which because it meant that he basically just got to waltz to the win, like literally like that. The palm on the forehead of the kid, while like the kid's trying to swing, and like the adult like that's how it felt. Like I'm just over here swinging. Um, so, but that was a lot of fun. Good game. Finished reading the John Jay biography, which I think I had mentioned last time we were together. Good John Jay biography. I really didn't consider him to be maybe part of the top pantheon per se, but this book really made the case that John Jay belongs up there with like Madison and Hamilton and Washington is like maybe like the top seven. Adams, Franklin, like the top seven uh, founding fathers. He's kind of like the one that's kind of off in the shadows, but he really did a lot kind of while he was back there. I also read the book And Then There Were None, which is an Agatha Christie novel. Have you read that one? Have
I
seen
have
that one?
not, but I'm nodding because we had talked about Agatha Christie a while back, and so I was looking up some of her books, and that was one of the first ones that popped out to me, and I was going to get it, and I got sidetracked. So now you're reminding me again to get the book, basically.
It's a good one. It's so Hercule Poirot is the main detective she normally uses for her stories, but this one doesn't have a detective that solves it. The idea is that uh, there are 10 people brought to an island, and they're all accused by their host of being murderers, and they all deserve justice, as in they all need to be offed. So the question of the book is, or the story is, who is this mysterious person? Who is knocking them all off? Will our final people, the ones who are the survivors up to the end, will they last and solve it before they are themselves killed? So apparently, it's one of the most sold books ever. So it's extremely popular, especially for when it first came out. There is some details about the title of the book, which if you ever get around to reading it, I'll tell you about that. You might look it up
Okay.
yourself and find it out. Because basically, And Then There Were None, the name of the book as it currently stands on my shelf, was not the original title, and the original title was pretty interesting. I'll just leave it at
Okay.
that. And then finally,
Okay.
I've been reading for the past few days Stephen Ambrose's D-Day. So Stephen Ambrose is the one who wrote Band of Brothers. After he wrote Band of Brothers, he wrote D-Day, which is about the entire D-Day invasion. It's just been fascinating to kind of get the full scope of it because I've heard of it and I've seen Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers, but never really understood the full scope of everything that happened. It's been interesting to read about it. And then the shows I've been watching, I've been putting off Severance. I plan on watching Severance season 2 next because I just finished what I just watched. I watched the Squid Games. Excuse me, Squid Games, the real competition. Like they actually got together and they played Squid Games for real. They didn't kill anybody like they know.
Well, I should hope not.
Yeah, hang on, I hope not. But the idea is they basically played all of the same games from the show until they had a final winner. And then Beast Games, which is Amazon Prime's kind of version of that from Mr. Beast, the YouTube creator. He had his own show that he just released the final episode like this last week, and so I was able to basically watch the whole show without having to wait for any new episodes. Both of them were interesting and fun. Those reality shows are a lot of fun. Just to see these people under a microscope. A lot of times they're also super annoying under a microscope. Some people are like, I feel destiny on my side. Like, I feel that God has blessed me with this winning. God's on my side. He's going to help me win. I'm like, I really don't think so. I just don't.
I have that same issue when it comes to when on game shows or whatever. That's what they say. It's just like, look, just take the win and get
Yeah.
off. There's no need to invoke some kind of divine destiny as to why you won. Just say thank you. I'm excited. I feel
Yes.
lucky. I feel
Right.
grateful, and
Right.
move on. There's no need to do all that because I was like, I
No.
don't. You know, does God really play that much of a hand
Exactly.
in your winning? Yeah, just come on, like
Yeah.
move on, move on, move on.
That's
Yeah.
exactly how
So
I feel. Yeah, I mean, I go into more depth about it, but well, just
y-
to put it this way, there's one guy who in episode 6 is like crying because he's like, I can't believe you just did that. Of course, he's up on the chopping block himself. So this other guy does something and he's like crying as if the other guy did something terrible. And like it's pathetic. Like this is a grown man weeping in some bizarre way. And then in the very next episode, he does the most selfish thing possible. Um, Anyone who's seen Beast Games, episode 6 and episode 7, you'll know who I'm talking about. But just imagine some guy who gets super emotional and ridiculous and then immediately just makes a fool of himself. So,
yeah,
excuse me.
sounds wonderful.
But yeah, that's what I've been doing. How about you?
Well, beyond work and child rearing, it's been a pretty interesting time here because our weather has been in such a state of flux. We got like a severe cold streak, and then all of a sudden it was unexpectedly warm, and then back to cold again, which led to incredible round of well, sickness, and kids getting sick at school and trying to bring that stuff home and all that. So we're dealing with that. We're also dealing with announcements coming out of the school about uh, funding and so forth. So we're still dealing with how that's going to play out. But in the meantime, what I've been working on is I finished reading all of the Animorphs books. As you all,
Sorry.
why don't you mute
You,
yourself for a minute?
yeah, give me.
Yeah. Um, So while David's over there coughing up a lung, I would just explain that I we had talked a long time ago about these books, the Animorph books, and I found the entire series of books, including there were some collections that they had in the series. Found all of them in e-file format and was able to download them. And I finally made my way through all of them, which was something I hadn't done ever. Even as a kid, when these books first came out, I made it through a good portion of them, but I never actually finished the series. So I took this time to do that. And it's interesting to read a book that, one, it's about kids who seem to be, when this series first starts, I think the oldest one was maybe 13. And
Right.
then as the books go on, obviously everybody's aging up, they're doing different things. And, that's even part of the book is, going on to high school and so forth, and the changes of that. And things happen to characters, introductions of new characters, elimination of people who were friends who suddenly become foes,
Oh wow.
and foes made into friends. And I think one of my favorite books in the series was one where they found out about this guy who was um, he was basically eating the enemy. And
Oh.
it was quite the shocking reveal as to why he was doing it. And
Mm,
it was sustaining him instead of having to go back, because like the main enemy, they're called yerks. They're like these little slug things, and they have to go down into these pits where they absorb energy from like a chunk of crystal that's like part of their sun or whatever.
right.
And this creature has, he basically hates his people and has decided to help with like the insurrectionist movement against them. But in order to, maintain his ability to not go back down into these pools and,
Ah.
potentially betray the fact that he is, a double agent, he has found that by eating the yerks while they're in their slug form, it gives him the energy, so he doesn't need to do it.
Right.
So there's that, but obviously there's this psychological component of eating your
Your own
your
people.
yourself, your race, your own people, right? The
Right.
cannibalism aspect of it, which seems to have driven this guy a little crazy.
Right.
So there is that. And then there was another book where they're basically dragged through time, and they have to fight these kind of advanced aliens that are just been designed for killing. And no matter what they do, no matter what morph they take, no matter, any of those things, they seem to lose right up until this very, critical moment where instead of introducing battle to them, they introduce the idea of love and compassion and friendship. And it's an interesting take on a very otherwise brutal story. So those two kind of stand out to me as my favorites, but there are a lot of like great moments in these books. So I don't know if you've ever read the series. You should probably read it again because it's probably not what you remember. And then if you've never read it, I would suggest reading it, even if you are, in your 30s and whatever. It's an interesting young adult series that I don't think they really do young adult series like this anymore.
Right.
So I would definitely take a look at that. Another thing that I did was I kind of got into this whole um, what would you call it? Know your rights, your citizenship, what it means to be an American citizen stuff, And
Yeah.
so, David has talked a lot about certain books and stuff that he's read. He talked about John Jay here just a little bit ago. So I had started reading the Federalist Papers, which
Hmm.
I have my copy right here of
Hmm.
these, and I've been making my way through those. And what I've been doing, which is kind of might be why it's taking me a little bit longer, I also have a nice little copy of the Constitution. And so I've been kind of like reading these and then looking through aspects of the Constitution to kind of see, like, okay, here's what they're talking about in what they're writing, and, kind of just trying to put it together to see, how it stacks up with what I already, I guess, felt I knew. Because I
Right.
think that as U.S. citizens, we all kind of feel like we just know the Constitution, and that I'm sure there are certain things about it that you can recite from memory. I know that when I was in eighth grade, my U.S. history teacher made us um, review the Constitution and write all the amendments. We
Oh
had
wow.
this thick notebook where we had to go through and write all of them and all of the little bullet points and all that kind of stuff. It took forever. It was the longest class project I can ever remember being a part of.
Hmm.
Um, but again, just like I said, I feel like all U.S. citizens feel like we just kind of inherently know the Constitution, but you don't. I'm going to just say that you don't,
Yeah.
and you really should get a copy and just review it. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a major, deal or whatever, but having it and just taking a little bit of time to go through and read something on it every so often is probably a good idea for all of us. And if you want to do what I'm doing, which is kind of the comparison with the Federalist Papers, um, it's a great way to see like how the framers and writers of the Constitution, what their thoughts were behind the document they had just submitted.
Yeah.
So, and at the time, I think it's important to note, and I don't know if David talked about this when he was reading the Federalist Papers, but the whole reason that these were printed was because at the time the Constitution had been presented. It had not been voted on and ratified yet. At this point, it was just something that they were proposing, and so the Federalist Papers are the arguments for why they should ratify the Constitution and what it
Yep.
would mean for the country going forward. So
Right.
that's why I think it's a really good thing to read, because this was before it was the law of the land.
Yeah.
These are the major arguments for it. So if
Yeah.
you're really just kind of wanting to know, if you ever wanted to know what was behind it, the Federalist Papers is probably like the best thing you're ever going to get that's going to give you that answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say it's the Federalist Papers are a lot of fun because there's a lot of great quotes in there. Madison at one point says, um, if we were governed by angels, we wouldn't need a government because they would just be perfect. But we're governed by men, therefore we need the government to be have laws. But if we have men ruling over men, well, we can't trust men to do a good job. So how do we balance that? And the idea is that you balance power against power. You intentionally want people to be fighting over power, and by fighting over power, you balance things out. That's why you have the three branches of government, etc. So it's just a fun. It's just like these guys like studied ancient Greece, ancient
Hmm.
Rome,
Hmm.
the British Constitution. They just were like these guys were like, what's the best government you can put together? And they disagreed hard. They like
And
at
and that's one of the things I really like so much about what I've read so far, is because there is a disagreement about it, and but it's also it seems to set up, and I haven't finished everything, so I'm not sure, but it does seem to set up the fact that the Constitution is an always evolving and improving document. It was never supposed to be something that is 100% set in stone. How it was written way back then is it.
yeah,
No other changes, amendments could ever happen to it. It's definitely set up to be, like they're saying in a lot of the writings, we recognize that this is a man system, therefore it is a flawed system. So by acknowledging our flaws, we're hoping that we can continue to make something better and more befitting our situation and our circumstances and our people. And
yeah,
so that's what I really have come to appreciate about what I've seen so far.
yeah,
But yeah, so like I said, I think that everybody should take just a little bit of time to review at least the Constitution. Um, but another thing that I have been reading, and it's along the same lines, and like I said, I feel like everybody as Americans or as a United States citizens anyway, we say that like we know the Constitution, and another thing we often hear people say is, "I know my rights." And I always find that a very interesting thing that people say, because it's like, well, do you really know
right,
your rights as a citizen and civilian of this country? Do you? And I think that probably by and large we might hit the high points, but do we totally know all of our rights? Probably not. So another book that I have been kind of going through is the Civilian Rights Hand Guide, which
oh
is
nice,
just it's basically what it is. It's your rights as a civilian in the United States. Okay,
yeah,
so it makes a very good point about how it can't cover every single thing, but it's typically the things that are the most common, like things that are encountered or brought up when people have to deal with police, law enforcement, judges, lawyers, anything like that. Now, it's not going to tell you how to, beat a murder rap or anything like that. So if you're trying to, do that, but if you're looking for like Yeah, if you're looking for, what exactly is your right when it comes to representation and counsel, that's in here.
Mm,
What are your rights when you encounter police on the street and they stop you and ask for information, or you get pulled over? What are your rights there? What are your rights when it comes to you're in a grocery store and something happens and police are involved? What are your rights? Just kind of almost seems like common sense stuff, but it gives you more specifics on things like what it means to consent to a search and the scope of a on the on the side consenting search and all that kind of stuff. So just like if you're interested at all, I really suggest picking that up. Again, it's the Civilian Rights Hand Guide. There are several different versions of this book. This one is the most recent version. Okay, so you can find, like, again, I think the earliest one that I found, the same author. The earliest version of this that I found was like 2010. This one is 2024. So
right,
I'm not exactly sure how often he puts these out, but I just went with it because it was the most recent one.
right.
And then finally, the last but not least thing that I was been reading these last 2 weeks is, of course, book 8 of the Expanse series.
Yeah.
And I am trying to make my way through it. For those of you who've been reading these with us, you'll know that the very first opening line in this book really upset me, so I had to put it down for a while, and then I did come back because I'm dedicated to finishing the series. But
Right.
again, the first sentence
Yeah.
just
Come
gut
for our
punch.
After Dark episode when we talk about that, because
Yes,
you texted me. You're like, I can't believe it. I was like,
I
what's
uh,
going on? I
I
pulled it up.
was I
I'm like,
was so
oh.
upset. I was so upset. I mean, it was just like, I'm like, seriously, I read it and I was just like, oh no, closed it, done. I was like, I cannot believe this. So,
uh,
so yes, we will be talking about it soon enough when we get to our After Dark episode about the books. But this is basically how I've spent the last 2 weeks going through all these books and series and stuff like that. So I feel like overall it's been very productive. And again, if you want any of these books, I'll put a link somewhere, maybe on like our Facebook page for all of these. So if anybody's interested, you can find all of them. Um, but yeah, that's it. That's how I've spent my time, and that's apparently how we've just spent the first 20 minutes of our show, is talking about these books and stuff. So
season 7 can wait.
yeah, this is a delay tactic. I don't want it to end, so this was my
Yeah.
delay tactic. Um, you know, but no, we're not here to talk about all those things. We are here to talk about Star Trek: Deep Space Nine, Image in the Sand. Do you want to give the recap, or do you want me to do it?
I guess I can do it. You did it last time, right? For the
I think
finale
so.
of season 6. All
Yeah.
right. Okay. So yeah. So again, this is Image in the Sand, and it's been about 3 months since we've last seen our various members. The Cisco's are on Earth because Captain Cisco, Ben Cisco, is very depressed after having lost Kira at the end of last season.
Um,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Lost Jadzia.
Jadzia. I'm looking at Kira's name right here because she's now Colonel. Anyway, uh, so yes, Jadzia was killed by Gul Dukat, being possessed by a paw wraith last season, and so he was very depressed by that. The prophets are seemingly gone. The wormhole is closed. Bajor seems to be abandoned by the prophets, and so Cisco is also depressed, gone to Earth with Jake. He's now working at his dad's restaurant. Um, Kira is now promoted to colonel on the station. She's basically running the station in Cisco's absence. During this time, there's a cult of the Paw race that has grown up in the absence of the prophets being around. And of course, she doesn't like that, but she's not going to force people to, go away. She might have some negative things to say about it to Odo,
Yeah.
but
Religious freedom on the station.
exactly, exactly. Um, so the Federation comes to Kira and says that we want the Romulan Empire, or the Romulan Empire has asked to have a delegation on the station under a Senator Kretak. Kretak is a woman, and of course, Kira is initially very hesitant to even allow them on the station because the Romulans are not very friendly people, as we've seen many times before. They betray everyone they can get a chance to betray, etc. But when Kretak, or her name, however you say her name, whenever she comes to the station, she actually manages to charm Kira. She is a little bit deprecating about the Romulans and how everyone they're always arrogant and rude to everybody. And she comes to Kira to ask for certain things, including setting up a hospital on the uninhabited fourth moon of Bajor called Derna, because the Romulans have been taking a number of pretty heavy attacks during the invasion of Cardassia. The invasion of Cardassia, which we did see the beginning of last season, at the end of last season, did not go all the way. We are still trying to invade Cardassia, and it's kind of come to a standstill. Worf, of course, is still grieving over the death of Jadzia. The Defiant, for example, has been just around on escorting missions, hasn't gone to any serious battles, which we find out is kind of a problem for Worf because he would love to have some sort of strong, really dangerous battle or fight to go to, so that he can, on Jadzia's behalf, fight and get her entered into Sto-vo-kor, or the Klingon heaven. The idea is that she didn't quite meet the requirements to make it to Klingon heaven, but Worf, as her still living husband, could retroact or could do something to get her into heaven. Some big battle on that he could fight, might be able to do that. Chief O'Brien is the one who has to drink several bottles of blood wine with Worf to get that out of him. And General Martok offers him the chance to go on a pretty dangerous mission that we're going to find out at the end of this episode is apparently enough that they're worried that they really are going to die. Dr. Bashir, who always had a crush on Jadzia, wants to go with Worf, and so O'Brien says, "I can't let Bashir go by himself, so I'll go along." So we have our three main men willing to go fight for the dead Jadzia's honor. But the main plot line is the one with Ben on Earth. It's been 3 months, and he's just been kind of listless this whole time. We see him in the beginning of this episode playing the piano in the middle of the restaurant, and he's playing it beautifully. I don't know we even knew that he knew how to play, but he's
and real quick on that side note,
sure.
that's actually Avery Brooks playing the piano. He
Is
really
it?
can play the piano. He is a accomplished musician. He's played on stage. He's played at conventions. The man can legitimately play the piano, and he sings. So just so
Oh,
you know, that's all him. That's not fake. That's real
wow.
talent.
I legitimately thought it was a double because the first time we see his hands playing, the camera moved away from him and then came back to see his face. So I thought maybe they pulled a body double switch, but okay, all right. He apparently can play. Um, so Cisco is he's doing that, and he has the baseball on the piano, and it suddenly moves and falls to the ground, seemingly by itself. And while he's looking at it, he has a vision, seemingly from the prophets, where he's on some sort of planet and he's digging in the sand on like a beach or something, and he unearths the face of a woman he does not recognize. Using one of the Federation tablets, he puts together the face of the woman he's thinking of, and Jake, of all people, recognizes it. Turns out, while he was doing some cleaning in the shop or in the restaurant, he saw a picture of the woman that Ben saw with his grandfather, with Ben's father. So there's a picture of Ben's father and this woman together. Initially, his father Joseph doesn't want to say who the woman is and refuses to talk about it. But Benjamin kind of gets a little rough with them, actually.
Yeah,
I'll say, and
kind of
says,
scared.
scares his father and says, "I need to know who she is." And so he admits that it turns out the woman is Ben's real mother. That the woman that he knew as Mama, or I think he said Mama,
Yeah.
was actually not his mother, but his stepmother, and that his stepmother was telling his father multiple times, "You need to tell your son about your wife." Turns out, shortly after Ben was 1, she left and went to Australia. She left, Ben's father and Ben, went to Australia, and 3 years later, Joseph did track her down, but she had died a month earlier. So we don't know much about her at the moment, but she did leave I guess, a necklace for Ben, or at least that he gives to Ben. And on the back of it is some Bajoran writing. And Cisco is able to work out what it says, and it says something about the Orb of the Emissary, which is the first time we've heard of an Orb of the Emissary. But meanwhile, when he discovers this, a Bajoran shows up and says he wants to meet with the emissary, but he actually attacks Ben, stabs him multiple times, and we learn that
Mhm.
he was one of those members of the Pa-Wraith cult that we saw at the beginning of the episode. He does not kill Ben, but does say that you'll never find the orb, and so Ben
Well, it's
decides
not from
he's.
lack of trying that he doesn't kill Ben.
Oh man, that
You
those
know,
stab wounds look pretty serious to me.
yeah,
I'll tell you. For a TV show, it was pretty gnarly.
yeah.
Um,
For a '90s TV show, it was pretty graphic.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Ben is gonna go to this planet to go search out the orb of the emissary, seemingly from the vision he just got. Joseph and Jake are up and ready for him in the morning, already packed and ready to go. They're gonna come along with him, but before they can leave, a young Federation Trill officer shows up and introduces herself as the new Dax. And that's the end of the episode.
Yes. So a lot there that we get in this season opener, which is pretty much on par for Deep Space Nine. They never really leave you lacking when it comes to their starts. Um, so as always, like to ask you, since it's the first time that you're the first time viewer here, what did you think of this episode?
This episode felt like a filler episode. I guess I
Fair.
forgot to mention before we do anything else, Kira learns that the Romulans are using the hospital, but they're refusing Vulcan patients, and they have stocked it with weapons. And so she confronts the senator, who she initially seemed to be getting along with, and says, if you either get your hospital off our planet, you get your weapons off our planet, or we will do it for you. So we have a confrontation of three different factions amongst this alliance, which, of course, the Dominion, Wayun, he is very happy to hear about this later on. So anyway, we have a setup, and that means this whole episode really does feel like a lot of setup. There's a lot of we're
Yeah.
getting things
That,
going from the end of last season. We're getting some plot lines going for this season, so it feels like a filler episode in that way.
and that's pretty much on par with us with an opener episode. They've got to kind of fill us in from, where we were to now where we are, but it's also got to set the stage for a lot of what's to come, which this episode absolutely does. We know now what Ben's mission is. We know kind of now where he's going because we knew he left the station because he needed to figure out how to bring the profits back. And now we also know what he's been doing during that time, and we now see him on the road to doing that. We also now know kind of the next phase of the fate of Jadzia Dax. Worf is seeing to the more spiritual aspect of it, and we have this new Dax character has presented themselves as well. So, and we also get a little bit of a war update. We know that with the wormhole being closed, that the Cardassian Dominion forces are kind of rebounding here. We know that they're winning in like the Chintaka system at the very least. We know that the Romulans have become a more consistent presence on the Federation side of the war, and we also can kind of see where, like Kira's promotion, how Odo's acting, all that. So we get a nice little update as to what everybody's been doing. And then we also see what's going to be kind of the projection of things going forward. So
Yes,
I could definitely agree a little bit with it being a filler episode, but it was instead of saying filler, more like a fill-in episode. We've
sure.
now been filled in on everything that's going on,
Well, I
so
mean,
we're ready.
the other way to say it, this is a part one of two kind of episodes. For
Yes,
example, we have the Worf, Bashir O'Brien. They're going to go off and do some sort of battle next episode. So we know there's going to be a payoff. We just don't know what it's going to be yet. Same thing with Kira. She is confronting this Romulan ambassador and saying, "Hey, you are betraying your trust by doing what you're doing." Um, I I love the Romulans, man. They are just the worst. Like that's their whole thing is like we're gonna betray you. I
They're
literally thought of the
duplicitous to a
line.
fault.
I
Duplicitous
literally
to a fault. They can't stop themselves.
yeah, well I literally thought of the line, and you're gonna love this. It's Firefly, episode one, the pilot. Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal. Like it's gonna come. The T Rex will turn on the Stegosaurus every time. There's no stopping it. So I part of me is expecting excuse me, something to happen here. I love the idea that this Romulan senator, this ambassador, that she is like the next evolution in Romulan like trickery. She's charming. Normally they're rude and obnoxious and they just piss everyone off, but that means that anytime you have a charming Romulan, that immediately allows you to like you're immediately drawn to that one because you want them to be nice and friendly, and that immediately allows that one to gain your trust and that much more easily betray you. So I just love the idea that that was the whole plan the whole time. Yeah, she was.
It's I love the Romulans for the simple fact that
Yeah,
you never trust them. You never trust a Romulan. I don't
right.
care what they say. You never do. And when she comes on and she's all smooth talking with a very distinct voice, by the way,
Yeah.
the actress who plays Kretak in this episode is Megan Cole, who, for you Star Trek fans, should know we've seen this actress a few times pop up in Star Trek. She has played in the Next Generation episode where they had the race of people who were they were all androgynous. She was one of the
Oh,
leaders in that episode.
interesting.
She was one of the leaders there, and she plays Kretak for us a few times, and she plays an unnamed Vulcan judge in an episode of Deep Space Nine. It's the one where Worf is put on
Mm,
trial.
right.
She's the Vulcan judge in that episode. So
Interesting.
yeah, so she's popped up a few times, and it seems to be like that that's kind of her shtick. But yeah, even with her being kind of this more intriguing, interesting, we see her eating the Jumja stick, and she seems to want to really get along with Kira. Ultimately, her Romulan duplicitous nature comes out, and it's, oh yeah, we want to set up a hospital, but we're also going to put massive weapon emplacements all over the place.
Right.
So, oh, we forgot to tell you, by the way, but now your moon, that's
Yeah.
our moon.
Yeah.
That's basically what they said.
I regret not
Yeah,
telling you, but it's too
yeah.
late.
Regret not telling you, but we're dug in. You can't get us out, and now we've got more than enough weapons to defend the place. So
Yeah.
again, your moon is our moon.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
And yeah, and Wayoon calls it perfectly when they find out about it. Of course, he's like, leave it to the Romulans. And it's
Mhm.
like, yes, absolutely, Romulans gonna Romulan, man. They are
Yeah.
they are not trustworthy at all.
Yeah. Which is
So
so interesting. Why I forget the admiral's name. We've had him around all the last
Admiral
season.
Ross,
Admiral
Admiral
Ross.
Ross.
Okay, like Admiral Ross, like he's fine. He's not someone that I love. He's not endeared himself necessarily, but he's not like a bad dude either. But when he's like, yeah, I'm just telling you, Colonel Kira, as a courtesy that the Romulans are coming aboard the station. Like, talk about like the whole idea is the Bajorans are still their own entity. So the
Yeah.
idea that the Federation is elbowing them aside to let the Romulans through is
So this is
interesting.
this is one of those situations where I feel like they always show Starfleet making a critical misstep. You know, for the longest time, they're all about honoring the sovereignty and autonomy of Bajor, but only so long as there's a Federation officer kind of like overseeing things, which they had in Ben Cisco. Now
Yes.
that Ben has, stepped down, moved on, taken a sabbatical, whatever term it is they've put on this leave of absence,
Right.
now all of a sudden the Federation's like, well, we got to deal with this native. Screw that. We're just going to do whatever we want.
Yeah.
We're in more time.
Disco
We
was a
need this.
figurehead the whole
So
time, and
yeah,
now we let him out. He's not
and
here
this is where
anymore.
Ross makes his mistake because before, when we had seen Ross, he did seem to come off as an authoritative but otherwise benevolent entity here.
Right. Yes.
He let Cisco take lead. He supported him, backed him up, and so forth. And you feel like that's kind of the role he should have taken here with Kira while she's stepping up and stepping into this role that Cisco had. But he's like, nope, not going to do it. You're not on my level at all. You didn't go to Starfleet Academy. You're not a graduate. You're not a captain. You're just here. So this has already been decided. Get with it. And it's just it damages him here. If you were a fan of Ross at any point, this probably diminished him a bit because he now comes off like every other typical, you know, hardened military wise ass that you don't like that you see in these things, and you're just like, yeah, you're not good anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Part of me wonders if maybe this is supposed to be an indication that maybe he's been replaced by a Dominion
Mm-mm.
changeling. I mean, I don't think he has been, especially because I will say the Deep Space Nine as a show has not leaned overly hard on the idea that the changelings are there, which might be a good thing. Part of me feels like that means they just kind of underused that plot device because it is a very fascinating plot device. It's like they made that choice early on, and they, I guess, wisely decided not to overuse it, if only for budgetary reasons. It's hard to
I think
always.
that's what it really came down to. Like being able to do the special effects necessary for the changelings and everything else was almost prohibitively expensive at this
Exactly.
point.
Right.
So this is certainly Deep Space Nine is an interesting show in that the complexity of the show really lends itself to a larger budget, like a show, almost a show ahead of its time. If the show is being filmed now, the stuff that they'd be able to do with the effects would be absolutely amazing.
Right. Yeah, it would be pretty simple to do it now. But anyway, point being is that if you're saying that it's kind of a Star Trek trope to have some Federation admiral, usually an admiral, do
It
something.
is. It's the most classic trope, which doesn't ever seem to make any sense because we know what the chain of command is, right? And we know that after captain, the next rank is admiral. You get promoted from captain to admiral. We see it all the time. But it seems like the captains are always like the best of us, right? They're just these wonderful leaders, compassionate people. They have an innate understanding of not only Federation law, but the law, and I'm thinking of Captain Picard here, of
Right.
course.
Yeah.
But then it's just like, as soon as they get that next pip on their collar and become an admiral, all that goes out the window. And it's like,
I
uh,
imagine they're on the front lines. They're with the people. They're having to actually negotiate with these alien races. But when you're sitting in a seat on the back row, you lose touch.
I
And
mean, I guess that's what it's supposed to be. It's like you've been an admiral for so long, you've forgotten what it means to be a captain, and so all it is you just become just a jerk. You're just a jerk all the time. It's like, why are you? What is that makes them do this? Because it's like, in theory, all of you, in order to be an admiral, you had to have been a captain at some point. So why are you suddenly so awful? And yeah, it's just like Ross kind of points it out. We see that in him here. We see it in other admirals. Go back and think of the other admirals that we've had to deal with in Star Trek, not just with Deep Space Nine, but in Next Generation. Like, probably infamously, Admiral Nechayev, when she comes to the Enterprise and dealing with Picard, she's awful. She's so just mean, and you don't like her. Picard doesn't like her. No one really likes her. She comes to Deep Space Nine. She's bullying the staff around, treating Ben like crap. And again, you just don't like her. And she's young enough that you're like, I could see where you probably were promoted within the last, 10 years. It
right,
shouldn't be that far gone for you to remember when you were a captain taking orders from your own asshole admiral. Why did you immediately become one? So,
right,
it is a common trope in Trek when you see an admiral or someone, basically anybody of higher rank than captain, when they show up, they're a jerk.
yeah,
And that's it.
right. Yep. Well, hopefully Ross doesn't quite get to that level, but he can be.
Hopefully Cisco comes back before he becomes truly
Yeah.
a jerk.
Yeah.
And then Cisco can kind of smooth those edges a little bit because it definitely seems like he enjoyed working with Cisco more than he did anyone else,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Cisco kind of helps to hold him in
Well,
check a little bit.
I love the idea that that last episode, the finale of season 6, he came to Cisco and said, "You've been tasked with planning the invasion of Cardassia." Part of me was wondering, like, why is an admiral giving that job to a captain? Is he passing that duty off to somebody else? Is he getting a subordinate to do his work for him? I mean, Cisco is, I'm sure, the best option for the job. Don't get me wrong, but I was like,
Yeah,
you two were like at the beginning of the season. The whole idea was y'all were working together to like defend whatever that station was they were on, or they were working together on a defensive angle. And now that Admiral doesn't feel confident to plan an aggressive action, he's got to be on the back end. Um, but I don't know.
yeah, and it's also like things like that. Pointing that out, it kind of makes me wonder, like how the command structure truly works in Trek, because you're right. Like he's the admiral. He is in theory, he's overseeing all of these starships and space stations within a general region of space, right? And so for him to come to one of his captains and be like, I need you to plan this major operative offensive that's
Mhm.
going to basically use up all of my resources and probably several other admirals' resources for your various for the fleet that we need to put together to do this.
Uh-huh.
Um, the fact that he doesn't seem to be more involved with the planning and also the execution of this major offensive, just is like, how do you give out recognition for this? Like, if the plan is successful, are you going to put all of that onto the captain and be like, you did a wonderful job? And is that instant promotion? Should Ben have, upon successful completion of that mission, been elevated to admiral himself? Or should the mission be successful, does he get all the blame? Or like, where does the rest of the Starfleet higher ups, because there are people higher than admiral out here, do
Mhm.
they then go, well, yeah, Ben did a great job, but if it wasn't for Admiral Ross seeing that spark of something in him and picking him out of all the other officers, we never would have had this.
Right.
Like, I just want to know how that breakdown works. And I guess that's also kind of a question I have for like the military in general. Like, how does any of that really get done? Like, just massive amounts of paperwork and monitoring, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
So, but anyway, one of the things that I really enjoyed about this episode was the fact that we were back on Earth
Mhm.
and we were getting to see a little bit more of the Cisco family dynamic. This is the Cisco's without any kind of pressure or trappings of Starfleet, of Ben being a captain in Federation life. We
Yep.
don't even see Ben in his uniform. The whole episode, we never see Ben in his uniform. He's wearing like he's got his kitchen scrub attire on in one scene. He's wearing civilian clothes in another scene,
And his PJs. He's
Yeah,
got some PJs, bro. He's got a
yeah, that's
robe.
the
I'm
man is
like,
styling all episode. Like he's on point
so it
the
turns out
entire
whatever
episode.
Jake Sisko was wearing was just waiting for the real master of fashion to come out in this
Listen,
first episode.
I feel like while there were some elements of Jakeisms in what Cisco wore,
I was gonna
Cisco
say,
Cisco pulled it off,
yeah.
whereas Jake never should have put it on. Like that's that's just it. Like
That's Avery Brooks for you, right?
there it is. The man's got style. That's just all there is to it. He's got style, and Jake hasn't learned that yet.
Yeah.
So, but I did enjoy seeing them. Like we right before he gets stabbed. Of course, it's a very nice family scene. Him and Jake joking around, and
Yeah.
he's talking about scrubbing, cleaning
Yeah. If
oysters
I
and
had to
stuff.
scrub,
And
never had to scrub an oyster again, it would be too soon.
yeah, and it's a very nice family domestic scene with them, which they've always handled very well on this show, I feel. But this is the first time we see it without the trappings of the Federation around it. So I really enjoyed that. And then, but yeah, let's talk about that stabbing scene. That's what I was kind of leading up to. We got this nice family moment, and then we got the horrible stabbing afterwards.
Yeah,
And
he gets a
man,
slash and a stab.
yeah, yeah, exactly. We hear them both, the slash and the stab, and then and of course he's in all white,
Ah,
immaculate white for sitting in
yeah,
the back alley of a restaurant,
yeah,
immaculate white, and then blood everywhere,
yeah.
and he's falling on the ground in the
I have
hole.
to say, I knew that guy was a Paul Wraith cult member immediately. He had the
Mhm.
look. I mean, that was probably the idea. They gave him the look. They gave him the red robe. But every word, whenever he was speaking Bajoran, like every other word he said was "pa." I was like, he's saying "pa Wraith, pa Wraith, pa Wraith" a bunch, ain't he? And then he stabs him. I was like, yep, he was an evil dude the whole time. Cisco, you should have seen him coming a mile away. But
Oh, you know they're evil when their hood is up so much you can barely see their face and they're standing in shadow. It's like
yeah,
double shadowing here. There's
right,
nothing about you that's good. Like if you want me to think that you're at least good, but we need to have the big reveal. Typically they can still be wearing the monk's robes, but it's pulled back more so that you see the silhouette of the head. The
right,
fact that we're still seeing him hooded up and in shadow, I was like, yeah, that's obvious bad guy.
yeah,
And then he's speaking and he's like it's kind of like that weird whispering while he's getting closer and stuff to him. And there's another, common trope of our hero not recognizing the mortal danger that they're in from this individual.
yeah,
I know personally, if I was working late at night in a back alley somewhere and
right.
some random hooded figure showed up at the end of the alley and
And call
started
me by
slowly
name.
called me
Yeah,
by name and started slowly walking towards me, there is no way that person is getting that close to me.
yeah.
Not at all. I don't already ordered it, man. You stop right there and you tell me what it is you want. Take that hood off, so you're not getting any closer to me
Yeah,
until I figure out who you are and what you want. But Ben's just like, oh no, I'm gonna lean down real close and expose myself to you and let you slash and stab me.
yeah.
Whew, man.
Well, I think it's interesting too because when the guy says I'm like from Bajor, like here to see the emissary, Ben's response is like, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're closed for the night." Like he doesn't, it doesn't have like a like at the end of the last episode, like all of the Bajorans are like, "Where are the prophets? You're the emissary." Like he felt kind of guilty for not having done something. And in this moment, he doesn't respond with like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I don't feel like I'm in a good position to talk right now." He's like too dismissive for the scene almost.
Mhm.
I feel like he should have been a little more like he should respond a little bit differently, like with guilt, like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't. I don't have anything for you." And then the guy
Yeah.
stab him, like he would expect it more. I don't know. It was curious the way they chose to play that scene.
Yeah, considering that, he has removed himself from Bajor, the sudden and again in short order, he's now gotten two things that remind him of Bajor. He's got the earring and now this dude. The fact that he's on Earth and has removed himself from all that, and then a person from Bajor shows up, the fact that he didn't take a little bit more time to kind of like assess that situation also was kind of, irresponsible to say the least. Like he definitely should have been on the lookout for something a bit more here, and or taken the time to be a bit more considerate of this Bajoran standing in front of him on Earth. I mean, I get it. Bajor and the Federation are allies, are friends, but they're not a
Right.
member of the Federation yet.
Right.
That's the whole point. So the fact that a Bajoran who's not in Starfleet has traveled all this way and found you here of all places,
Was curious.
yeah,
Yeah.
you should have been more willing to stop to talk to this guy and
Right.
been on greater alert than you were.
Right. Right. Yeah. Interesting scene, but it is what it is, I guess.
I'm just so surprised that they went so graphic, considering again this was the mid to late '90s, and yeah, you have your other shows that were out that were doing violent things back then, but to have such a graphic display on a show that really didn't have that. Like, we've seen them do fight scenes and stuff, of course, but this is the first time they've ever done a scene and it's, the blood and everything.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be that way. It was supposed to be graphic, it's supposed to be symbolic here. A very visceral, literally, blow for all of us watching the episode to shock us out of what we were in there. But yeah.
Well, that's why I was so curious that when we came back from the commercial break, he was already healed up, and his dad's giving him a hard time for like coming back without telling him. Like the blow looked so deadly, you'd think that they would start at the next scene with like, is he okay? But they immediately moved on to no, he's getting ready to leave. Honestly, I think they didn't need to do that choice. Maybe they were just trying to save the set. We don't need a whole new hospital set with him recovering and then promising to go on his journey and the others joining him. They just wanted to reuse the restaurant set and just had him just go back there before he left. That's how I feel it probably went.
Mhm.
But
And
I
that
was
makes
curious.
sense. I mean, it's just, he's on Earth. He's not that far away from Starfleet Medical and getting the rapid attention, And that's kind of what the next scene leads into, or is it alludes to, not leans into. It's that when Ben is walking back into the restaurant with the help of Jake, he's not all the way healed. If you notice when they walk in, he is leaning on Jake a bit for support. So you're kind of getting the feel that he most likely left against the advice of the doctors. He
Right.
got he got the medical treatment he needed to save his life, clearly, but he checked himself out early because he's intent now to go on this mission to um, Tyree. You
Right.
know,
Mhm.
so yeah, there was no need to do the whole hospital thing and seeing him recover and everything else because that wasn't the point here. The point is that he is showing the determination to get on the road to Tyree, and now his whole family is coming.
Yeah.
The Cisco's are all on board.
And the new Dax. I love the when she showed up. She's got the same tattoos or everything, or not tattoos, but the
The
marks.
spot,
But she's
the
also got green. I was just like, oh, so we traded in a kind of willowy, beautiful Terry Farrell for a cute little pixie version of her.
That is a accurate description. I think that's the one that's used for her a lot, is that we went from this tall, statuesque model Dax to cutesy fairy pixie
Yeah,
Dax.
yeah,
And there are more differences between them that are coming.
I'm sure.
So we'll
But I
definitely
have
get
to
into
say,
that.
the I was disappointed that when she showed up, I'm sad that Cisco didn't immediately say, "Old man," like recognize who that it was Dax.
Well, I mean, and to be fair, there are a lot of Trill. And there are a lot
Sure,
of joined Trill. So just
sure.
because a joined Trill walks in, there's no guarantee that it's Dax. I mean,
Yeah, but I just love the idea that like
yeah.
he's connected with the Dax symbiote and
Well, and
Jadzia and
we don't see
Curzon.
much of an interaction. Like she says, it's me, Dax, and then it cuts. So it's conceivable that the next time they talk to each other, we get the old man reference, which
Yes.
just shows more of the conversation. But I get what you're saying, and I feel like that probably could have been something they played off if, like, I don't know, maybe if they hadn't killed Jadzia, but they had left her like critically wounded and in a coma, and we're not sure if she's going to make it or not. And then the season 7, opener ends with Jadzia walking through the door, and he says, "It's nice to see you again, old man."
Right.
That would have been great and not had this, wonderful character killed off for no apparent reason. But no, we
No
have to deal with
names.
this.
No names.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not going to say whose fault this is.
Yeah.
And I hope that it's something that you realize you're going to catch hate for the rest of your days. As long as anybody ever reviews this show and talks about it, you're going to catch some criticism for, you jerk. But for all the good you did with Trek in the past, you messed it up, man, when you screwed over Jadzia. So I will, and there's going to be a lot of that, unfortunately, that comes up because we're going to see some things with this new character. And even just now, I was remembering um, some of the stuff that, again, that comes up and discussing it with other people, and it always being this is something they could have done with Jadzia. This is something they could have done with Jadzia. Why didn't they do this with Jadzia? So forth and so on. We're going to get that a lot. So just be prepared.
Yeah. Oh well.
So, last but not least, in our final moments here of the show, we do have to discuss Sarah Cisco. We haven't really talked much about her, and she's a crucial part of an episode that she's not even really in, just her face, the image in the
Yeah.
sand. So we find out here that Ben Sisko's father, Joseph, was married to another woman before the woman he grew up to know as Mama, and their relationship only lasted 2 years, basically long enough for them to meet, fall in love, get married, have a kid, and then a year after the kid was born, she checked out.
Right.
As Joseph says, she just disappeared. He didn't know why. There was no talk, no explanation. He kind of makes it sound like, he just kind of woke up one morning and she wasn't there,
Right.
you know. And he then found her years later. Doesn't say how many years later, but just that he
I think he
found her
said
years.
three.
Oh,
It
3 years later.
took him
Okay.
3 years to find her. Yeah.
So then if we track the timeline, Cisco was born a year later. She disappears. So that would make Cisco one, and then he finds her 3 years later. So that's four. So
Right.
at 4 years old, he found her living in Australia. No, he didn't find her living. She was
Right.
already dead by the time he found her.
That's correct.
Okay. So no answers for the Cisco family at all as to what was going on with Sarah Cisco.
Yeah.
Um,
I assume we'll get those answers in the
Crazy.
next episode, but that is it's crazy that well, I feel like this is such a bombshell to drop on your adult son. like yeah, it turns out the woman you knew as your mother was your stepmother. And the woman that was your mother not only was like she dead, but she abandoned us when you were still an infant. Um, and you never knew her. Like I just like there's so many questions I feel like Ben would have had. Like he would have had a sense there was something wrong with Mama and just like who
Well,
she was to him.
well, again,
I
if you
don't know.
think about it, I don't think so. Because I mean, this is he his mother basically was there long enough to get him to 1 years old, and then she's gone, and we don't really know how soon Mama Cisco came into the picture,
Right,
and as far as we know, I mean, like, I can't imagine Joseph moving on so quickly, to all the way to the point of marrying someone else, um, especially considering that his first wife had disappeared. She wasn't dead. She didn't die in a tragic accident or anything like that. She
right,
just wasn't there one day, you
right.
know? So, I mean, they don't really talk about that in this episode, but I like to imagine that this is probably one of those situations where, again, she disappeared. Joseph's trying to figure out what's going on, what to do for his young son, while also trying to keep his family and business afloat. There's probably a close family friend who stepped up to help out. That led to a development between her and Joseph, which then that development becomes her being Mrs. Cisco number two.
Right,
So she was probably a constant person in young Ben's early life anyway. She just became more of a presence, which would explain why he was able to transition so easily into this person being his mother, not the other woman. Because she left when he was so young. At 1 years old, there's
right.
not much that he's really gonna remember of this other
Yeah, no,
person.
definitely. But my thought was more in that, like, let's say it took him the extra 3 years, to find that she was dead before he moved on to a new relationship. Then 4-year-olds can start knowing things. They'll start they have memories and they'll ask
Yeah,
questions. But it
but
doesn't matter too much. I'm just
no.
what I'm getting at is like, I mean, how old is Cisco in these episodes now? I mean, I feel like he's close to 50. If he's late 40s at least,
Yeah,
right? So
he is late 40s because if we remember when we saw the episode with the Marquis with him and Cal, they talked about how they had both um, competed with each other to get promoted. They wanted to be, the youngest captains and everything else. And so their
right,
plan had been to make captain by the time they were in their early 30s. And
right,
they had made it all the way to commander at that
right,
point. And
right.
then, and I think at that point, Ben was 37, 38, and then 2 years later he got promoted to captain. So Ben was a captain at least by 40, and now here we are, and that was in season what, 3, 4 he gets
That
the
was like
promotion.
Oh, to captain? I think it
Yeah.
was 4. Yeah,
So
season
he
4.
would have been okay. So season 4, he would have been 40 years old, got promoted to captain. Here we are, season 7. So 3 years later. So yeah, he's mid 40s
Okay.
and he's a captain.
Anyway, point being is that I feel like, I mean, Ben's father says I made a mistake. That my wife, the mama wife, she had told me to tell you, and so um, it just came off to me as like this is a huge thing to have held back and then drop all of a sudden. And like when
So
you say your stepmother told me, I was like, oh man, that's a rough word for people to hear, stepmother. Um, anyway,
so I get, but as a parent, I can kind of see it
yeah,
because you have this young child that you're trying your hardest to protect from a very emotional trauma, the
right,
fallout here.
right,
And you see, well, because you're struggling yourself and you're trying to figure all this stuff out yourself, and you've got this other person who has stepped up and is caring for your kid, and you also have feelings for them, and you can kind of see this projection of where things are going. And
right,
while they may be saying to you, tell the truth, tell your kid, whatever, you're probably thinking you have no intention of not telling them the truth, but trying to figure out the right time and place to do it, you know?
uh huh.
And are you going to tell a 4-year-old something like that? Something that they probably can't really
Oh
grasp the
no,
concept of? No, I'm just saying in general. This is,
right,
I'm,
right.
I'm thinking this is how the projection probably went. And
Oh,
it
okay,
probably
okay,
was probably a, no, no, of course not. We're not going to tell this to a 4-year-old. We're going to wait. When he gets older, whatever. And so then things develop. And we know that Cisco went on, or Joseph went on, he got married again. He had other children. We know that Ben has a sister. I think he's got two sisters, if I'm not mistaken. Um, uh, there's a family. They have a whole other family unit. And so now you got your son who's been raised with his siblings, everybody thinking that this wonderful woman is Mama Cisco. And do you suddenly want to throw a wrench in that? Your son's now, let's say, 10, 12, 13 years old. Do you suddenly he's got a great relationship with her. Everybody seems to just really, we're a tight family unit. Do you suddenly want to throw a wrench in your tight family unit by bringing up that you're not only is she not your mother, but your real mother left us unexpectedly with no explanation, and she's dead. You can't
right.
even go and talk to her. You can't do anything about it. She's dead. And so I could again see him not wanting to do that. And then, here we go. Some more projection of time. And Cisco is, he's
13,
going
14.
through,
Yeah.
and then he's 18 and he's going
Okay.
off to uh the academy and he's dealing with that. Do you want and we know
Before
that
you leave,
Cisco's trouble.
son, here's a
Yeah,
giant bomb to drop on. Yeah,
yeah.
okay. I
No
get
way.
it. I
Okay.
get
And
it.
then it just kind of keeps snowballing. And then, when are you gonna tell him, when whatever. And then at some point, Mama Cisco dies.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, do you want to tell your son that the woman that was raised by and who just died? Oh, don't worry, she's not your mom. Your real mom died a long time ago. No. And then, he's dealing with the death of his wife. His first wife dies. Cisco,
Right.
Jennifer dies. Oh, hey, by the way, we also have that in common because, yeah, your mom died a long time. So again,
Dang,
there
Gary, you're
doesn't
making a
really.
compelling case.
I'm just saying from the standpoint of Joseph Cisco, I get it. Like they're never, why would you want to bring that pain on? And then, and Cisco, he doesn't it doesn't seem like he gets it at first, but we've got more of this to watch and more of the development between the two of them and whatever else. So hopefully you get to a point where we can kind of see them coming to an understanding on this. But that's how I was looking at it, especially now in watching this episode again. It's been a long time since I've watched this one.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I was thinking when he was, when Joseph was kind of putting up his walls to it. I was like, well, I can kind of see why he would want to not tell him, you
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right. All right.
Oh, did I win that one? Did I make sense? Did I?
I
All
still think
right.
I still think that if I were Joseph, I would have found a way.
No, David,
But
I
I
win.
don't know. I don't. I mean,
Just I
I'm
win.
not a parent, so who am I to say?
Yeah, just that's all I can think of. Oh, hey, your first wife died. Well, what a
Oh,
coincidence.
yeah, yeah,
You know?
exactly.
Yeah.
Uh,
So that's awful. That's
yeah.
absolutely awful.
The one other thing I forgot to mention during my recap is that Worf went and got a little. He went and tried to have the singer Vic Fontaine
Vic,
sing. I forget what song it was.
all the way.
All the way. Because apparently it used to be Jazia's favorite song, but Worf goes in there and gets halfway through the song and then destroys the
Oh, he
the
gets
the
more than
bar.
halfway through it. He just doesn't get to the end.
Well,
And
fair enough.
he's
My
he destroys the bar.
Yeah, point being is that's why O'Brien gets sent in to go talk to him because Vic, who knows his self aware of his hollow a hollow
Status.
person status, is like he can't come back in here. I'm not singing that for him again. But it's like, excuse me, it's like, well, this is a fake bar. Like, what's the problem? And
That's
that's
yeah.
the point they make about the other band members. The band members are threatening to quit, and you know,
And it's
Quark
Quark
is
who
like,
says they can't quit their holograms.
Look, they don't know that. I love that. Vic knows, but no one else knows. I like Vic Fontaine. When we first had him introduced, I think you kind of insinuated that some people don't like him. I like
No.
him.
There was a bit of a backlash with Vic there, didn't see the point in adding this holographic character so late
Run.
in the series
Yeah.
and so forth. And to a certain degree, I can kind of get that part of the argument. But then, there are some people who just felt like he didn't really add anything to the story overall. I was like, no, he gives them an interesting way to explore certain aspects of their personalities
Yeah.
that wouldn't otherwise be there.
Right.
And it was and something that was also kind of lacking in this show because Deep Space Nine is undeniably the darker of all of the Star Trek franchises,
Yeah.
So they needed to have this kind of element in there that allowed them to kind of play around a little bit. And it's interesting that it took them this long to find it in a holographic character. And I'm going to actually credit Star Trek Voyager with that because
Oh.
by this time in Deep Space Nine, Voyager had been running for a couple of years now, and
Yeah.
they had a successful holographic character there in the form of the Emergency Medical Holographic Program, the EMH, our doctor.
Right.
Um, so I think that they kind of just were like w- wanting to play with that technology a little bit more, but they wanted to do it different. And so
Right.
having a sentient or not or as close to sentient hologram that they could
Yeah.
play around with in this, sandbox here was the best they were going to get. So,
Yeah.
but while I can see initially kind of being hesitant about Vic, undeniably what we're going to see of that character and the importance he plays with the other characters is going to bear out in this season. So I'm not exactly sure what the name of the episode is or anything like that, but it's coming, and
Yeah.
you'll know it when you watch it. It's a phenomenal episode. So
Gotcha. Well, I think it's interesting that they've already committed to the idea of his character because in the last episode, the finale of season 6, they had him briefly show up. But this is the third episode in like 10. Like it was only like 10 episodes that we first saw him, and they've already committed to Vic Fontaine, the what kind of
the
singer is
lounge
he?
singer,
That's it, lounge
the
singer. I love how he makes that when he talks about like I'm never gonna sing that song again. If he wants to hear it again, he can go get a recording of what's his face.
Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, Sinatra. And I just love that idea that like he knows who Sinatra is. I like that. I
Well,
like
that's
the
the whole
idea.
point. That's the whole point. He's programmed not just with the knowledge of those people, but from Vic's standpoint, they were all contemporaries and friends.
Right, right,
He sang with Sinatra and Dean Martin and all those guys.
right,
They put on shows together. That's how the program was written. But
right.
there's an extra element to the program of being like, I understand that all that stuff
Was
one is programmed and two was also 400 or 500 years ago,
right.
so
Yeah, I just
there's
love
a
the
distinction.
just the sarcasm of this hologram character who like is self-aware.
Hmm.
It's just fun. The idea that this character can make jokes and quips that like you can't hurt me because I don't exist kind of thing. But anyway, yeah. I feel like that's everything that I
Yeah.
might have missed. Is there anything else that I might have missed? So,
um, no, that that's about it. So, um, I guess so. Yeah. With that being about it, final thoughts on this episode. Do you think? I know we said more of a filler, fill-in episode, but do you think that it was overall like a good one, or is it skippable, or is it what for you?
Well, I guess actually one quick thing is it very stereotypical to comment on a female character's hairstyle, like Kira's new hairstyle? Like I didn't like it. It was a
Oh,
little too much, a little bit too much on one side with like
oh, she
little
had
braids
the
in it.
yeah, she had the. I did notice the braids. She's got two little braids on one side.
Yeah, like
Um,
this is the biggest change in her look since the beginning, I feel. I mean,
Her
she's had
uniform
different
has changed. Yeah,
uniforms,
her uniform has
sure,
changed significantly.
but her hairstyle has always been consistent, I feel. And this is like the first time it's changed. And like, I don't know, Odo didn't comment on it or anything, you know.
Well, when she's gone through a lot of hairstyle changes now that I think about it. Because when she first started, if you think all the way back to again the pilot episode, she's got that. It's longer and it kind of like stops right around here. It's kind of a throwback to the Rolaren haircut that they
Okay.
because again the character was being styled after Rolaren, and then
Right.
she moves on to something that's more of a definitely more of a militaristic trimmed like kind of a box cut that she's got. And then she kind of grows out of that. And I don't know what you call the next one. And then she's got a couple other ones before she finally ends up here. Um,
Okay. Fair enough.
but yeah,
Yeah.
she goes through significant hair changes for sure.
Right. Well, anyway, it just stood out, and it was one of those things. I mean, again, maybe I'm just being a stereotypical dude commenting on a woman's appearance. Who cares? Whatever. Fine. That was my final thing. You know, she and Odo are still apparently a thing.
Mhm.
They make some brief comment about the kiss on the promenade that they had. So yeah,
Well, yeah, Noto seems to be very calm, very well adjusted these days. He's not the old curmudgeon that we used to have. He's very much oh, everything will work out. You just gotta, don't worry about it so much. It'll pan out. You'll see. You'll see.
right.
So I don't know how I like that. I want gruff and tough Odo back a little bit. I don't mind him being in a relationship at all, but I don't like that it's suddenly like that was the thing that it took to get you to stop being such a, you know,
Yeah, you
an
mellowed
asshole,
out so
Right.
quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it is what it is, I guess. Well, all right. I think that will wrap it up for us on this episode. Like I said, we are in the final stretch here of this season. Um, when it comes to the episodes and what is available on the various streaming platforms, I think at this point, everything except for like the last two from season six are available. Those last two should become available this week. I can only make it drop so many at a certain time, and because we had that weird time where it wasn't letting episodes release, it kind of got this weird backlog. So that's what I've been also doing over the past 2 weeks, was trying to get it to kind of release the multiple episodes so we can get it done. But I guess
Right.
there's a limit to how many they'll let you just put on their platform for free. So they're coming. I think what I'll try to do is finally get those last two to finalize before we post this one to have it available on all the platforms. But of course, you can always go and watch this again or access our show on YouTube as well. Any questions, comments, concerns you have, please send them our way via our Facebook page. We no longer have a X, a Twitter, or whatever. Just there's no point in dealing with any of that anymore. I tried, it wasn't going to work, and I don't really like Twitter anymore anyway. So we don't have to worry about it. All right. Um, but yeah, other than that, guys, there's no new Trek news at this time. The Section 31 movie is out. It's available. You should watch it. Um, the Strange New World stuff is still slated to come out later this year, and then there's no other new Trek stuff yet. So we'll just have to wait and see. So until next week, guys, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.